It's the Joe Pag Show. Glad to have you here. Really glad to have back the senator from the great state of Texas. It's Republican Ted Cruz. Ted, how are you?
Pags, I'm doing terrific. Glad to see you mentioning Parler, too. It's, as big tech gets worse and worse, both you and I are doing more and more in Parler.
Well, Ted, I got to tell you something, and I didn't know we were going to go here, but let's just do this quickly. I gained 130,000 followers in 4 days on Parler. On Twitter, I've lost about 300 since the election. Just 300 people. So, I mean, obviously, we now have empirical proof that when big tech does what they've done to us, we can go to an outlet, a social media outlet, that will do what we thought social media was going to do. Ted Cruz brings his followers there. Those followers can now see what Ted Cruz posts. That's not that complicated. That's the way it should always be.
Well, that's right, and to give a sense, on my end, I've got north of 4 million followers on Twitter.
Right.
I've only been on Parler a few months, and I think I'm at 2.5 million there. So it's the numbers build up quickly when you don't have big tech throttling it. You
wrote a book that's the number one bestseller on Amazon. It was last time we spoke, and this book was prescient, certainly. One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. It may come down to that, Ted. Before we dive full-throated into that, though, let's talk about where we are. You're a constitutional expert. I'm not. I've read it, but I did not realize how wrong I was last weekend when I thought the secretaries of state or maybe the governors got to decide how voting happens in states. That's not true. The U.S. Constitution says, and you'll verify this for me, that the state legislatures are the ones that set the rules. Well, Ted, that frankly didn't happen in many states when it comes to mail-in voting, right?
Well, that's exactly right. The Constitution explicitly specifies it's the legislatures, which is unusual. Normally when it talks about states, it talks about the state as a whole rather than identifying and singling out the legislature. And in this case, in a number of states, most notably Pennsylvania, the governor and the state Supreme Court, both Democrats, tried to change state law and set aside state law that the legislature had adopted, and that's one of the central legal issues at the heart of the litigation in Pennsylvania.
I'm going to ask you, Senator Ted Cruz, go follow him at Ted Cruz, at Send Ted Cruz on Twitter, also on Parler. I believe it's at Send Ted Cruz. Go and follow him right now. And again, that site is going nuts. If you're not there yet, you need to be. But let me ask you just a very direct question. Just give me a yes or no, then I'll tell you why I'm asking. Is this election decided?
No.
Okay, so now let me jump in both feet. Georgia is doing a manual recount. Obviously, there are issues there. You've got, looks like Wisconsin has enough votes that are in question that there's a push for a recount. We'll see what happens there. North Carolina has now been called for President Donald Trump. As per the officials in North Carolina, not the AP and NBC necessarily. We'll see at the end of the day if that gets certified. And then Pennsylvania, as you said, is a complete mess, as is Michigan. There are anomalies at least, if I'm not going to say fraud, which I think I can, there are anomalies at least that would say, why are we offering up a guy as the president-elect? Why are we saying that he's talking to us from the pulpit at the office of the president-elect, which doesn't exist? Ted, why are we here? Is it your opinion that this is just gaslighting, a narrative by the left and by the media to make us give in?
Well, it's clear that's what the media wants, and the media doesn't get to select our president. Under the Constitution, that is a job for the voters. And here's a proposition that is very simple and didn't used to be controversial, which is that elections are over when the results are final, when it is decided. You count the ballots, and in this case, in a number of states, there's litigation disputing the ballots. There are recounts going on. We need to let that process play out. We need to respect the rule of law. The media doesn't want to do that. They want Joe Biden to be the next president, so they're trying to tell everyone they've declared he's the president. Well, that's not how it works. And listen, it may end up there. It's possible when all the ballots are counted, when all the litigation is done, it's possible Joe Biden prevails. And if that's the case, then he'll be the next president. But It's also possible that the Trump campaign prevails in their challenges. And the objective should be for every single legal vote to be counted, but for every vote that was illegally cast, that was fraudulent or otherwise contrary to state law, for every illegal vote not to be counted. And that's what the litigation process is designed to assess. And that's going to take several weeks. It's not going to take months, but it's going to take several weeks for that to play out according to the rule of law.
The name of the book is One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. The author, Senator Ted Cruz, on with us right now. Ted, you and I both lived through 2000. We know that Florida was all sorts of screwed up. We waited 37 days to find out who the next president would be. And I don't remember anybody, maybe you know some people, but I don't remember anybody on the left who said, hey, let's just give it to Bush. I don't remember anybody saying that. What I remember is we recounted the votes in Palm Beach County where they didn't know how to vote for some reason. That they counted them again. They wanted to count them again, and the Supreme Court got involved and said, no, you counted it enough. Even after the certification of the election and George W. Bush was the president, the Miami Herald counted him again, Ted, and still George W. Bush won Florida. Why was it okay to do it then? And 3 days later, in this election, we were supposed to shut up and suck it up, according to Whoopi Goldberg.
Well, Pags, you're exactly right, and everything you described is correct and accurate. You mentioned a minute ago my book, One Vote Away. There's an entire chapter on Bush versus Gore. So I was part of the legal team representing George W. Bush in Bush versus Gore. I was a young lawyer at the time. And if you want to understand what's going on in all these recounts, what's going on in the challenges, the book One Vote Away takes you behind the scenes in terms of what happened there. And on election night, in 2000, early on, if you'll remember, the media, the networks, they all called the presidential race for Al Gore.
Right.
They actually called it before Florida had finished voting. Part of Florida is in another time zone. The Panhandle, which is more conservative, was still voting.
Right.
And the media, you and I both remember Dan Rather gloating as he called Florida. And then the media called the entire presidential race. They said Al Gore has been elected president of the United States. But then there was a problem, which is that didn't actually match the votes. And as they kept counting the votes, they realized George W. Bush had more votes. And so then you remember later in the evening, the media retracted the call for Al Gore. And then late that night, they switched the call to George W. Bush. And they called Florida for Bush. And they actually called the presidential for Bush. Once again, I was watching Dan Rather for some reason. He was so miserable saying George W. Bush has won the presidency of the United States. And then the margin was close. And so what Al Gore did is he sent his lawyers in and filed a number of lawsuits.
Well, if I recall the time, I want to interject this. If I recall, he conceded, then he took it away. And George W. Bush says,
exactly right.
You're rescinding your concession? And he said yes. I was a television news anchor in Lansing, Michigan at the time. I was actually at some hall doing local elections, and I saw Dan Rather do what you said. And if Dan Rather calls Florida prematurely for Bush or for Gore, it has a two-pronged result. And I wonder if you agree with this. The Panhandle, that's in Central Time, it's a very red area of Florida. They say, oh, damn it, Gore won. Why should I go vote? It's going to be a wasted vote. Or, yay, my guy won. Why do I have to go vote? I got what I wanted. So he could have disenfranchised a ton of people in Florida just by that announcement. That's why we're so skeptical today, right?
Yeah, and the media didn't learn any lessons from it. But the point is, even though they called it for first they called it for Gore, then they called it for Bush, then they retracted it.
Right.
And you know what? That was actually the right thing to do, to retract it, because as long as that recount litigation was ongoing, the result was disputed, and we need to let the legal process play out. And it's a good illustration. In those 36 days, we had a full trial on the merits where the Gore team contested the election results. We had the case went twice to the Florida Supreme Court. It went twice to the U.S. Supreme Court in front of both. We fully briefed it, 50-page merits briefs on both sides. We had oral arguments, and the courts issued 2 decisions each. All of that happened in 36 days. The legal process can move quickly, and it wasn't until those claims had been resolved that George W. Bush became the president-elect. That's actually the operation of law. That is right now what the media desperately wants to avoid all across the country.
Hey, Senator Ted Cruz, one vote away, how a single Supreme Court seat can change history. So as we see this unfold, I wonder if because you've never been afraid of this before, I wonder if you, and I'm not saying by name, but just give me a few words on the Republican Party. We're seeing some really weak-kneed, lack of vertebrae Republicans out there just saying, come on, just concede. Come on, this is embarrassing. Come on. And we know that the process is going to be long. It's going to be arduous. And I see several paths to victory for President Trump. What are your thoughts on the future of the Republican Party, seeing that there aren't that many with a backbone like you have?
Yeah, unfortunately, there have long been too many Republicans who are afraid to fight, who don't like media criticism. If the media criticizes them, that they run scared. And I will say, President Trump, there are things he says and does that I wish he didn't do.
Yeah.
But his single greatest attribute, and the reason he got elected, is he actually stands up and fight. He'll actually take a punch and turn around and punch back. And a lot of Americans are tired of these mealy-mouthed politicians who are scared of their own shadows. And so, listen, at the end of the day, the Trump campaign may not prevail in this litigation, but don't be so scared of the media lecturing. You know, the other day, Chris Wallace called me, one of those guys on the Japanese island who still think it's World War II.
Wow. Well,
if he weren't a leftist, he'd get decried for the racist stereotype. But set that aside, he is, just because he is so partisan and hates Trump so much that he can't view things objectively, as he demonstrated in the terrible debate that he moderated that everyone panned, doesn't mean that we just have to roll over because he wants Joe Biden to win. Wait till the damn cases are decided. And listen, it is hard. It is hard for you. It's hard for me. It's hard for anyone to know which of these claims of fraud are accurate, what's not. You know, you can't decide it based on a tweet here and a little snippet there.
Right.
But thankfully, we have a process to decide those issues, the legal process. In a court of law, lawyers present evidence. You lay forward statistical analyses and expert testimony and actual fact witnesses, and trial courts are designed to determine facts, the extent to which fraud occurred, how it impacted it, and rule on questions of law. And we should let that process rule out, and that is 100% consistent with defending our Constitution and democracy.
Right.
And that ought to be an easy position at the minimum for every Republican. It ought to be everyone's position.
Hey, Senator Ted Cruz, the phone's breaking up a little bit, but hopefully it'll clear up because I've got just another quick question. I know you've got to go. This is likely to end up in the Supreme Court. If the case is that these voting rules, when it comes to mail-in ballots or whether you have to show an ID or whatever the hoops that you have to jump through to go and vote in a specific state, were not decided by the state legislatures, this is kind of an easy decision for the Supreme Court, is it not? You didn't follow the Constitution, so it's illegal. I mean, I'm not really sure why there's even a question there.
So on that pure issue of law, I think we're likely to prevail. Right. Justice Alito wrote an opinion in which he said that we're likely to prevail on that pure issue of law. It is not certain the Supreme Court will agree to take the case, and the reason for that is the margin in Pennsylvania is pretty big. It's about 45,000 votes.
Right.
It's not clear how many votes fall into the category of received after Election Day and in the bucket that the state Supreme Court illegally created. And if it is a smaller number than that, I've seen some reports of 10,000. If let's say that's accurate. I don't know if it's accurate, but let's assume it is. I think it is possible the Supreme Court will decline to hear the case because the argument on the other side would be it won't change the outcome. Yeah. And so to get the Supreme Court to hear the case, the Trump campaign is going to have to systematically prove enough misconduct, enough fraud, enough conduct contrary to law that it could alter the outcome. And that's not easy. I'm not saying that the Trump campaign's legal endeavor is an easy challenge here, but it's important to adjudicate it fairly, consistent with the law.
And give me about 30 seconds on AOC and others making enemies lists, dancing on the graves of Republicans. We're going to have a reconciliation committee, according to some now, Ted, because Joe Biden is going to fix what Trump broke so badly in America, and you and I will probably be on those lists.
Look, from their perspective, this is the French Revolution. They want to set up guillotines. They are radical zealots, and they want to punish. You've got Democratic groups calling for anyone who worked in or with the Trump administration to go after them and prevent them from ever getting a job anywhere, to go boycott their employers. This is sick. It's extreme. It's radical. And it's why the Georgia Senate races matter so much. I'm going to Georgia and campaigning. On January 5th is the runoff for 2 Senate seats in Georgia. It will determine control of the Senate. We can't let Chuck Schumer get control of the Senate because it will give the radicals, the zealots, the Marxists a majority and control. That's really dangerous.
Those become very important races. Ted, I can't thank you enough for the time. And also go to tedcruz.org. Ted, thanks a million.
Thank you, Pags. God bless you.
All right, brother. We're back after this on the Joe Pags Show. Stay right here.